Thank you very much for that. So now we are recording, everyone. The normal, as opposed to perhaps some dysfunctional emotions that might happen during this period, some of the effects and ways to monitor it. Then we'll look at the cultural and social implications and pressures that could also have a real impact on the postpartum period. And then we'll talk about when to seek help. Again, looking at that difference between perhaps low mood and what might be postpartum depression and what options are available for you. And then we'll go into the Q&A.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Devin, for your
You're welcome.
introductions.
Shemaya and Ilda, do you want to add anything before we jump into this topic here?
No, I'm looking forward to this. And absolutely, if anyone has any questions, just please put them in the chat and we'll go through them as we can.
Yes, definitely. So Ilda, if you could start us off with talking about some of the physical changes that happen in the postpartum period and what could people expect?
Okay. So the postpartum period, it's actually been coined as the fourth trimester, which gives it sort of the false impression that it only lasts 3 months. And that's not the case. For most women, it takes around a year for your bodies to regulate and to get back into pre-pregnancy mode. For others, it takes 2 years. And this is all making assumptions that you've had a healthy pregnancy, that you've delivered a healthy baby, that there haven't been any complications. So when you add all these other things that can potentially add stress and burden to parents, then you can see how this postpartum period could really be extended. So in terms of physical recovery, there's the basic physiological recovery of the uterus and returning to the pre-pregnancy size. That takes about 8 weeks. There's the hormonal changes. So we know that estrogen and progesterone levels drop dramatically after delivery, which often contributes to mood dysregulations and changes and postpartum depression, as we've heard before. There's certainly thyroid hormones that imbalances that can be caused at times. We know it affects our cardiovascular system. It affects our physical body changes. Our anatomy is different. There's pelvic floor recovery, weight changes, metabolic changes. So when you think about all these physiological things going
Mhm.
on, and you've got a little new person that you're taking care of, you can see how emotionally challenging and stressful and overwhelming it could really be.
Mhm.
Um, and those were just the physical. I mean, there's some neurological changes as well that we go through, but I'm wondering if Shamyle has anything that she would like to add before we get into the self-care strategies.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Devin. Hello, everybody who's joined and who will be looking at the recording. I hope you get a lot of new information and needed information from this conversation. For the postpartum period, I think Ilda pointed out very nicely that there is a lot of false impressions that terminologies and the narrative we have constructed around this period promotes, but we really want to base whatever conversation we have on hard facts. And the hard fact is that it is a very complex time because there is compounded effect of multiple changes that has happened um, before this and during this time and then after. So what we're talking about essentially is a period of juxtaposed transitions, which makes it very complex and complicated as well, and a wonderful time. So as for the timeline, you will get different timelines based on who is writing it. But if you're
Mhm.
talking about physiological and psychological assimilation of these changes or transitions, it can take a while. Like it can take from 2 years to 7 years if
Mhm.
you're talking about assimilation, right? Because change has happened, accepting that change, comprehending, giving meaning to that change, and then going ahead with that
Mm.
change can be a process. And so, what we're going to be talking about here is going to be about taking this period as not a checkpoint that you have entered and then you exit. It's going to be about a process that you have entered and then you get to make your own out of it, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that that is a workable perspective to take forward as you're moving into this conversation. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I actually really love that, Shamyle, that you brought that up in terms of that it's a new life period that you're entering, because we often hear about going back to our pre-pregnancy weight and our pre-pregnancy body, and going back to before having children and before having a family. And what you're suggesting is that actually there is no going back,
Mhm.
because it's a new stage of your life, and it presents with different challenges and different um barriers and obstacles to overcome. So I like the way you frame that, because there's often a lot of pressure on women to go back, to
Mhm.
those pre sort of child
Yeah.
periods.
And I found that, of course, in counseling, I found that if we take in that perspective, it adds more resistance to the process of change, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, and it gets in the way of them becoming what they're becoming, right? Whatever their body's supporting, whatever their neurological changes are supporting. Instead, they come into that friction with it, you know?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Whereas, of course, because this is a natural and one of the most miraculously supported process any human body goes through, it is transformative in beautiful ways as well, right? So while there is vulnerabilities here that this process adds, there is a lot of and very different kind of growth opportunity that this also offers. And then we're going to learn about that as we get into the physiological changes and how, how to take care of yourself during that time. Yeah. So there's
Hmm.
not only risk, there's also strengths here.
Thank you
Absolutely.
both. Shamyle, would you like me to share that video now?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So this is something that is fairly recent, last year actually. This study was published. What you're seeing here is two images. The person with their child is actually a neuroscientist in the University of California, who during her pregnancy volunteered to be part of brain, like a research, to have her brain scanned through different stages during her pregnancy. What that revealed was, and this is what we know as of like last year, is that there is an increase in the number of um, what we would call um, a structure in your neurological system that helps take messages from one part of the brain to the other. And we've seen that there is a significant increase in that neurological like structure. And what you're seeing to your left here is like a video, like a little GIF that shows that your brain or the pregnant person's brain is going to undergo remodeling. So you would see that a lot of literature previously has supported that there's an increase or a decrease of certain molecules or certain reallocation of resources in your brain. But this research actually shows that it is non-linear, right? So your brain is going to adapt during the time of pregnancy, and this remodeling continues after, like in the postpartum period, which means that it's not a categorical process. It's an ongoing becoming process. So your brain is actively participating in communication with your body, understanding what your body needs at that time, and then allocating resources in different parts of your brain accordingly during this process. So again, this is to reaffirm with hard facts that this is an ongoing process. You're going to need different things at different times, and your brain is going to support you because that is natural, right? And so, of course, what we want to do emotionally or environmentally or socially is to support that as opposed to resist it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you, Shamyle. It's nice to be validated that, baby brain is actually, it's a scientific, it's been proven now. So thank you for sharing that video. Could you both share a bit about some self-care strategies that women can integrate during this time?
Absolutely. I'll start with the easy ones, which are the physical self-care. We know that emotionally and mentally, those challenges are greater. So I'll start with the physical. Definitely prioritize your rest. Physically, your body is changing. It's utilizing a lot more energy. It needs a lot more nutrition and sleep. So that idea of sleep when the baby sleeps, it's not just a suggestion. It's an absolute must that you need to rest. Staying nourished, well hydrated, practicing some gentle movements. It doesn't mean that if you were going to the gym 3 times a week that all of a sudden you're right back in there. No, it simply means some gentle movements. Um, talking to your support network about what it is that you need, with and asking for support without shame and without guilt. I think is really important. Setting realistic expectations for yourself, I think, is also really important. I think as a society, we place a lot of pressure on new parents to be perfect parents, as if there's some sort of handbook out there that tells us what to do. And the reality is that there is no such handbook, and every child is different and every parent is different. And so, really taking the time to set up your own expectations and based on your own needs. And of course, I'll let Shamyle extend on this, but there's always the opportunity to seek professional help if needed. But I'll let Shamyle sort of elaborate a little more on this.
Yeah, what came to mind when you were talking about this is my brain just drew a parallel of pregnancy and the changes that goes through the body during that time, growth period, I would say growth spurt of a kind,
Mhm.
with the adolescent growth spurt period, right? Where there is structural changes in the brain that's happening, there is body that's growing, there's bone structures that's changing, all of these things.
Mhm.
Of course, I don't want to reduce the experience of pregnancy because that's happening on a very different level. But for a common person to understand, because everybody at this point, I'm assuming that whoever is listening right now is an adult, they have gone through an experience like that, right? And so they'll be able to empathize with the process that a person goes through when they're pregnant and then after, right? So just like you can't go back into childhood, you're not going to go back to your pre-pregnancy. And so I think that with that experience, you'll be able to understand the self-care strategies that you had to use during your adolescence, or if you're raising a teenager, right? Or you have teenager around, you would be able to see there's a lot of patience that's going to be a key ingredient in any strategy that you would apply, right? Patience with
Mhm.
yourself, learning about yourself, because you're changing as a person, your preferences would change, your taste buds would change, right? Perhaps your relationship with the people that were very close to you would shift, right?
Mhm.
And again, I say that there's patience and compassion that's needed to contextualize all of this change so that it can happen as it needs to happen, right? So um, give yourself some wiggle room, I would say, during this process, as opposed to trying to fit in. It's more individualistic in terms of making that framework for yourself before you choose to step in and fit in,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Shamyle and Ilda. The takeaway there is really, it's not one size fits all, right?
Mm.
Absolutely.
So really looking at for yourself and your situation, what is best for you. So thank you for that. We'll move on to the next topic here now. And Ilda, if you could, can you give the group here a bit of an idea, because we're talking about postpartum depression here. Can you
Mhm.
describe postpartum depression for the group here?
Absolutely. So, certainly it's changes, emotional changes where there's persistent sadness, anxiety, irritability, feelings of guilt, um, feelings of inadequacy, shame. Oftentimes there may be difficulty sleeping. So even when baby is sleeping, it's hard to actually get yourself into a state where you're able to sleep. There's appetite changes, fatigue. There's also difficulties bonding with your child emotionally and physically. There's, of course, it can lead to increased tension between your partner and family. And so there are ways that women, I'm not sure if that sort of gives a good summary of what postpartum depression can look like. And certainly it could be mild in terms of these symptoms can be challenging, or it can be very severe and extremely challenging to the point where your own self and your baby are at risk of being harmed. And that's not just in terms of inflicting harm on yourself, but through not eating properly, not resting, and not being able to sleep properly, not being able to nurture yourself properly. It can lead to some serious mental health conditions.
Shamyle, would you like to add anything to that, the differentiating between the normal and perhaps dysfunctional?
Yeah, I think the word dysfunctional, I really like to use that with my clients because w- as healthy humans, we want to be experiencing the entire spectrum of emotion, right? We don't want to say, oh, I never feel sad or I never feel happy. We want to
Mm-hmm.
experience all these shades, right? But it's the intensity that differentiates what is healthy from what is going to be unhealthy or dysfunctional. And like
Mm-hmm.
Gilda said, that there is going to be, because this is a vulnerable time, period. Like it is a vulnerable time, right? We need, if it's an internally vulnerable time, we need the external environment to support us during that time and carry us through until we have our internal changes assimilated, right? So I think it's we do rely heavily on systems, right? There's a quote that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you actually drop to the level of your systems. So taking that into consideration, if you have a physical health system, sleep system, diet system, social support system, that will just consistently and regularly check in, I think that should be enough. And whatever that looks like for anybody, that can differ, but we do need systems as humans. So yeah.
Thank you
Mm-hmm.
both. What would you say are the proactive steps that people can take to reduce the risk of postpartum depression?
Before I get to that, I just want
Mhm.
to add that some of the symptoms that we talked about, Shamyle and I, can be pretty common. And
Mhm.
so what helps to differentiate between, depression and postpartum depression is the persistence in terms of how long does it last. So if you feel that way, once in a while, then it's not as concerning as if it's persistent for longer than 2 to 4 weeks. And then it can lead to one thing we didn't talk about, which was postpartum psychosis, which it can lead to that, where you start experiencing hallucinations and delusions, paranoia, and that's when it requires immediate medical attention. So you do need to seek out immediate support, and it's important for families to also be available, as Shamyle was talking about, systems, being available and being there and supporting the individual and the child. So, and then I'll let Shamyle answer your question.
Thank you for differentiating that and sharing that the importance of frequency and severity and what it could lead to. Thank you. Shamyle?
Right. As for a proactive approach, I would just start talking about the proactive, saying that if you haven't been proactive, that doesn't mean that it's downhill. There's good reactive approaches as well that can sustain you during that time. But if you're specifically talking about proactive, I think it starts with learning about what's going to happen. Of course, everybody's different, is going to take it differently, but understanding what the change is upcoming pacifies the human brain. And this is not a suggestion that I'm giving because I think it would help. This is a suggestion that's based on how human brain works, right? We need to know to reduce or to bring that anxiety or the unknown down to a level that is manageable for us in order to then assist our emotion regulation, right? So we do need to know, and then that helps regulating emotions. So I think that while somebody's planning to have a child and they're learning about the physical changes that will come with it, and then development of the child, I think that one of the important planning pieces is planning the postpartum period, right? Not just until child's birth, but what is going to happen afterwards, not just with the child, but with the primary caretaker, right? Or the person that has birthed the child. So if that is part of your planning, I think that it is just going to help you perceive the idea of postpartum as something that's natural. It will just help you build context to those 9 months. I'm not just going to be like, okay, exit point, 9 months done, right? It's going to be life after. So, yeah.
Thank you, Shamyle. Ilda, anything to add on that?
I think, as Shamyle was suggesting, just being very intuitive and focusing on building your relationships, focusing on your self-care strategies. How well are you caring for yourself currently? What are some things that, what would one of my favorite approaches is the best friend question, which is, what would you advise your best friend? Because oftentimes we don't give ourselves the advice that we would give others. And so pose that question to yourself. In this situation, what would I advise someone that I really care about to do? What am I missing? What would I recommend? And that often gives you some clues as to where to start.
Thank you for that. Yeah. How might this time period and maybe the normal, as you're navigating these normal into perhaps more concerning emotions, how could this affect as you mentioned, the primary caregiver or the person who gave birth? How could it impact relationships around them?
Well, I mean, certainly when someone is more vulnerable, sleep deprived, going through hormonal changes, physiological, neurological changes, there's irritability, there's lack of patience, there's sensitivity. We tend to feel a little more emotionally vulnerable. And so if you have a support system around you who doesn't understand and have rigid expectations of what parenthood should look like and what you should be dealing with or coping with or managing, then it could cause a lot of harm. It can lead to a lot of conflict. And you see this especially when there's cultural expectations that are set up or societal expectations that are set up on the parent. And when there starts to be resistance, there starts to be conflict. So that's kind of how things can impact relationships.
Yeah.
Shamyle, anything? Yeah.
Yeah. What's coming to mind is a lot of conversations with new moms And one of the themes that comes up in my conversation with new moms is they feel as a person overlooked because of the new role, and it overshadows who they are. And because they've been
Mhm.
through so many changes, it's very difficult for them to even recognize themselves. So in that time, they need somebody, again, externally to kind of reflect back their person to them.
Mhm.
This is not to force the idea, of course, but again, the idea of checking in with that person and then how that person is playing that role or coming into that new role of a mother. I think that that's it changes the narrative inside the mind of the person that's given birth, right? So it helps them give an anchor that they can count on people to see them, right? Because that's the like the basic water need. Another thing that I would just say again in terms of understanding, placing yourself in the vulnerability meter is
Mhm.
to look at what there is a hierarchy of needs pyramid, right? I'm sure most people have come across it. Place yourself there. It's a very simple tool, right? And very visual as well to be able to place yourself, well, where am I at today or this week, right? And it's a very simple check-in question that anybody can do at any time. I think that helps us give the perspective of, okay, what do I need now, and what I cannot attend to because I don't have that capacity, right? So it helps give you yourself that empathy and that compassion of, okay, I won't be able
Mhm.
to do this, so I'm gonna, regulate my expectations.
Thank you for that. So as part of monitoring how they're doing is, a regular check-in. How am I feeling? How are my needs being met? And what else do I need? Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Ilda?
I think just being mindful of, I think oftentimes we feel a lot of shame about asking for help.
Mm.
And if you're sensing that, if you are hesitant to ask for help because you're feeling embarrassed or feeling inadequate, that is probably one of the biggest signs in terms of needing to ask for help.
Mm.
Because oftentimes it is so hard. And I think as parents and family members and community members, we need to normalize um, and encourage asking for help and encourage
Mm.
individuals to say, hey, like, can you deal with dinner tonight because
Mm.
I'm spent, right?
Thank you for that. I know with my two young ones, the first thing when my husband came in the door, we'd say, where are you at today? What's your
That's right.
capacity today? And if one of us said a two or what have you, maybe we were never a 10, but it was a good gauge just to see where we were going to try to meet in the middle somewhere that night. Thank you for
Hmm.
that. And so that's a good segue. Is there anything else on this one before I go on? Because I think we're okay. So cultural and social factors, um, I'll leave this open to both of you to share what you would like to. Maybe Shamyle, if you'd like to talk about the various pressures that can be felt.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be said when it comes to the systems we are part of, and when we change, of course, our relationship with that system changes, the dynamics change. And
Hmm.
so it's very real when you're talking about vulnerabilities during postpartum. It's very real, the challenge to answer the question, where do I place myself within the systems that I have previously belonged in very well? Now you're reflecting on it. This is not to say you don't belong there anymore. This is just to say you've undergone a lot of changes, right? And so it's a very natural question to come up during that time. Sometimes we get scared naturally by that
Hmm.
question. And that can lead us to not addressing it, which builds it up even more, right? So I think that one of the things to consider during postpartum is to make room for this question. You don't have to immediately answer it. You won't have an answer to it immediately, but just let it be, right? And just acknowledge it. And the answer is going to come. Um, yeah, I, again, I think that if you're going in with the notion of and this could be, of course, internalized because we've also been part of cultures and society. This could be an internalized message of this is what motherhood looks like, and this is the kind of mother I need to be, right? Because this is the kind of kids I want to raise. I think that is the secondary when in the natural process of postpartum or becoming a mother or entering that role. The first question needs to be, what am I feeling right now, right? And then building from bottom up as opposed to top down. And then seeing, okay, what does that make you? And then if you want to improvise, right, to meet whatever your expectation is. So if you're starting with the top and you're always probably always going to come up short, right? And that's going to lead to feelings of inadequacy. Whereas if you start from bottom and build your way up, I think that's going to be a constructive process and in alignment with, the rest of what we have spoken about so far, that it's like, it's yours, very personal, right? So try to make it your own as much as you can. Yeah.
Thank you, Shamyle. Ilda?
I think I would just say we've talked a lot about vulnerability as new parents, and I sometimes I think we use that word loosely, and it's like, well, what does vulnerability really mean? And I want you to think about everything that you've struggled with. So if you were experienced anxiety when writing a test in high school, or worried about what other people thought of you, or thrived when people were happy with you, or you accomplished something. When you become a parent, all of those insecurities and those worries amplify. And so when you add the external pressures and the cultural pressures or societal pressures on there, you can see how it could be really difficult to navigate and to regulate with all of those vulnerabilities and that amplification of fears that you have. And so again, it takes us always back to prioritizing, as Shamyle was talking about, prioritizing your own well-being, starting where you're at and looking internally in terms of what is it that I need? What is it that I need in order to be the person that I want to be and to raise the child that I want to raise?
Thank you for that. Really making it again individual and what aligns with you and your plans. So with that, how can you in amongst all this, you just mentioned all those factors. What do you suggest for people to really be able to prioritize their own well-being in this time?
I think to start off with, I always start with the easy. The easy is go to your medical appointments, go to your follow-ups, eat your regular meals, stay hydrated, focus on your hygiene and on your sleep. Those, although they're easy, I refer to them as easy. These are actually really hard things to do, especially when you're fatigued and overwhelmed and exhausted and sad. And so if you focus on those very practical things, it's a really good start, because then you're reaching out to other providers who will be giving you some support and who may give you some suggestions. Your medical practitioner may say, hey, you're looking a little sad, or you look really tired and fatigued. And that often opens the conversation and the discussion.
Shamyle?
Yeah. Well, as you were talking about it, my mind was going into, the sense of self, right? And when you do what's needed to be done, it adds to your esteem, right? The fact that you can do it. You can fulfill the new responsibilities that you have. So yeah, absolutely, these are not minor tasks by any measure. These are new big tasks that a person has to grow into, right? So I think that checking things off a to-do list, if these are the things, definitely adds to your esteem bank for the day. And so that adds to your sense of self, like, okay, there's a new capacity that I have to grow into. This is the steps that I'm taking to grow into it. Another thing that I would say again is something that I think is across the board, like whether you're in postpartum or prepartum or anywhere in your life, just be where your feet are. That is a very good, a very simple, everyday, all the time grounding exercise that I use it
Mhm.
myself as well. And a lot of people who are going through any kind of life transition find very helpful. Um, it is. I also want to highlight that the reason why we're here talking about all of this is a testament to the fact that this is hard to do. This is hard stuff,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So even though we're trying to say it and communicate it as simply as we can, it isn't simple, right? And so even doing what is simple during this time is going to be difficult. But I do want to say that one of the strengths, um, again, going back to the neurological evidence that we have through research, and it's very easily available for everybody to read as well, is that there is going to be strength allocation to your brain areas where it is needed at that time. So, really, literally, all you have to focus is on addressing your basic needs and you'll be fine, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
just it has to be a process. Even though your mind can go to 10 million things and 10 years ahead of, what kind of person is my kid going to be? It's for then. This is for now, right? Just
Mhm.
sleep, right?
Be in the moment.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for that, Shamyle. If that's okay, then I think that's a good message segue to the next topic. Thank you very much. Is when to seek help and knowing that difference between the low mood, the postpartum. You've mentioned a couple. We've talked about doing some check-ins.
Mhm.
If you
Mhm.
feel like you're going not you need to ask for help, but you're avoiding it. What else can you share with people about when they to seek help and what that might look like?
So my rule of thumb, I think, as a parent or as a family member, as a community member, is we often spend our days doing something for someone else. And so when you're a new parent, that someone else is your child. And I think rule of thumb is you midway through the day, you sit down and you ask yourself, what have I done for my child today? So let's assume you've fed your child, you've bathed your child, you've dressed your child, you've taken your child to a well baby appointment. Ask yourself, what have I done for myself? Have I dressed myself? Have I fed myself? Have I taken myself to a postpartum checkup or checked in with my family doctor? When was the last time I had a dentist appointment? So all these kind of things are sometimes good ways to remind yourself of what it is that you need. I think we've spoken already previously about the differences between low mood and serious postpartum conditions. I'm a big fan of therapy. Not only do I provide therapy for others, I also receive therapy. I think it's a great opportunity to be able to communicate with someone and to hear a, a different perspective and to be able to provide yourself with the opportunity to be given some feedback, to be given some suggestions, to be given some advice. And so I would encourage, in terms of your question, when to seek out help, you don't need to wait until you're struggling to seek out help.
Mm.
It could be anytime. You're a new parent, that's a different stage in your life, seek out help. We are seeing more and more, this is a side bit, of more and more individuals are coming to therapy for premarital or pre-couples counseling. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. They just want to be able to have the support and the tools and the strategies to be able to manage when things do go wrong or when there is conflict. So, wouldn't it be wonderful if every parent could go and have some therapy before welcoming their new child, right? And having those strategies already in place
And being able to talk through
and
all
talk
of
through it.
these like Shamyle was talking about these 10 million things that you're thinking about. You're thinking about 10 years from right now, right? To
Right.
really support you to be in the present while also expressing and being given that space. Shamyle?
Yeah, I would just build on what Ilda said because all my brain was saying counseling, go to counseling. um, you, the fact of the matter is, you probably do not have the vocabulary into the phase of life you're going into. You don't have the words to describe that for yourself specifically. You have a general information, everybody has access to it, but you don't know about yourself, like, right? What are your pain points? What are your specific strengths? And I think what counseling would do specifically for you is point to those, like your specific indicators of, hey, when this happens, then it means you need to do these things, right? These are your strengths. So bank on your, like, leverage that to kind of move through your weak moments, right? So that's very tailored to you. I also would want to say that it's okay if you want to not touch on a few things in your life in
Mhm.
counseling. If you don't want to open up into those windows, that's fine, but you can still open up into this, right? Because again, like, you literally have a new window to look at yourself through, and that's always good to have, because then you're not blindsided by the experiences that are to come. So yeah.
Thank you, Shamyle. Is there anything either one of you want to add about, like you're talking about the option of therapy, of talking to somebody? Is there anything else you want to add about ways to have help during this time?
I think what I would add is obviously seeking medical support at times, because we've mentioned the physiological and neurological changes in our bodies. It doesn't always mean that we get to a point of regulation. And sometimes we need some medical intervention, such as
Mhm.
medication, in order to support that. Another thing that I would recommend is connecting with support groups. Engage yourself in groups with other new parents who have had similar experiences. And then the last thing, other than involving your support system, of course, is know your options if there's a crisis. So know, your emergency room numbers, or having emergency contact list, so that if you do experience a crisis, then you know who to call, because in those moments it's hard to kind of think it through. So if you have these numbers and you've talked about this plan already in advance, then you're more readily able to utilize it and to orchestrate it.
Thank you, Ilda. Shamyle, anything to add to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just actually what Ilda said, write those numbers, post it on your fridge, easy access. These are very practical life tips, I think, and make a playlist for yourself, perhaps for the times that you're going to need another voice in your head, right? So plan for those things that you will have access to, things that have helped you. Maybe ask your family or friends, people you want to listen to or have access to, your mind, like that, people you're able to receive from, to send you a message and have that in your playlist to listen to, because one of the practical concerns is not everybody is going to be available all the time,
Mhm.
right? So have those glimmers saved
Mhm.
somewhere that you can access. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. So in a moment here now, we're going to open it up to questions. And so just before that, I just saw a resource shared. What would you like, Ilda, I'll go back to you. What would you like people's takeaway to be from our time today?
I think the takeaway would be that there's no wrong way of doing this,
Mhm.
that it's individual. It's important to focus on yourself first. So that idea of, I was recently on an airplane, and of course the safety conversation is always, if in a caregiving role and the oxygen masks come down, you put it on yourself first. Because guess what? If you pass out, then you're no good to anybody. And so using that same analogy, I think that's what I would end with, is that you really need to put that oxygen mask on yourself. And if you focus on those basic things, such as eating well, sleeping well, staying connected, hydrated, and moving, that you'll have the capacity to make healthier decisions and choices.
Yeah.
Shamyle?
I would, yeah, I think we're on the same page at this point. I think that, yeah, what Ilda said from her air travel experience, I actually was taken back to one of the drama series that I've seen, and there was a conflict between two characters about how, an elderly person, a grandmother, is behaving in terms of not getting the dental treatment that she needs because she's saving for something for the child. And the conflict is that one of the characters who's recently lost a parent says it's not the parent's responsibility to save up money for a want. It's the parent's responsibility to spend in places where they can take care of themselves so that they can stay in their child's lives for longer to, provide that safe relationship with the child is always going to need, right? No matter how old they grow. So we need to know wherever we're coming from is safe so that we are safe, right? So I think that it applies physically, psychologically, socially, just how humans are structured and designed. So just going back to the basics, the evolutionary, the groundwork, just do that.
Mhm.
That's very much needed because everything else is just built on top of it. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I hear a bit of, they say trust your intuition, and your intuition
Mhm.
definitely comes out when you become a parent, and to trust that and go with and go with that and reconnect with that as much as you can.
Yeah.
Thank you. So what I'll do now, if anyone wants to post a question in the chat, anyone wants to unmute themselves, I welcome you to ask any questions. You can also ask questions about any resources that are available through Sakeenah at this time. Anything that is coming to mind, please feel free.
I think there's been some posted.
Oh, sorry, I didn't. There we go. Thank you. They all just came through mine at once. So
Mhm.
I'll start at the top. When dealing with cultural expectations, do you have any tips about navigating relationships where there are expectations from family members to be hosted postpartum, performing firsts, like a first bath, other cultural things that have been done for generations, but it's not what you desire? So struggling to hold boundaries, but also maintain
Mhm.
peace in this fragile period.
That's an excellent question, and a very full question. I think we could probably do an
Mhm.
entire hour on trying to answer this question. But um, if I was to give any sort of advice, it would be to be gentle
Mm.
when communicating, to express compassion and appreciation of that relationship, and ask for a need. I need. So, for example, if it's, I'm thinking about some of my cultural traditions. I'm Portuguese, so there's the rule where when you first have a baby, you don't leave the house for 40 days. And so, I would probably have a conversation with my mom if I wanted to, if that pressure was being added on me, and say, hey, like, I love you. I know you care about me. I know you mean really well. This is what I need. And this will help me feel better, and this will help me care for my child that I know you also love. And so I think if we communicate in that way, where we express love, affection, appreciation, as well as making the ask and the need, expressing the need, typically it becomes a little easier to maintain those boundaries and for people to
Thank
respect your boundaries.
Thank you, Ilda. That was a good way to have that dialogue. It really sounded like a dialogue approach that you're sharing. Thank you for the question there. And how can mothers who've previously experienced PPD, postpartum depression, cope with the fear of experiencing it again? Shamyle, are you able to speak to this?
Yeah, I think that if somebody has come to recognize that their experience can be named postpartum depression, I'm assuming that they also have the awareness of what happened, what was needed, and they were able to provide for themselves afterwards, like whatever the need was. I think that, of course, that can be challenging going into that process again. And of course, our fears kind of project into the new experience. But I think if we do take a moment and take that as an educational experience for ourselves, the person is more likely to be more informed about their needs going into the second experience of birthing a child, right? Of going through pregnancy. So when you do have that information, I think you can make informed choices of the kind of support that you're going to need or you needed and neglected during the first experience. So I think that it gives you a lot of perspective of what to prepare for. Yeah.
Thank you. Along the same lines, Shamyle, can postpartum depression be prevented, or is that something that happens unpredictably? And then I'll go back to the question up top.
Well, you know what we discussed earlier, depression is not natural. All right. Mood variations happen as a consequence of the changes that the body is going through, adjusting on so many different levels. So definitely depression can be prevented or at least identified. It doesn't have to become a complex mental health condition or a dysfunction per se. But of course, there is a lot of resource that needs to be around in context of that change for it to not become dysfunctional. Yeah.
Ilda, anything to add to that?
No, I think it was beautifully answered. I think, and as you mentioned, Devin, as well, listening to your intuition, listening to your gut, listening to your needs, will help you prepare. And it doesn't mean if you've had postpartum depression with one pregnancy that you'll have it again with the next pregnancy. It often they're very different.
Thank you. And so the question here is emotional health something that can improve naturally over time with the right support, or does it require ongoing intervention and self-reflection?
Can I say both?
Hmm. That's what I was
Can I
thinking.
get,
Yeah.
yeah, can I say that both apply, and both are
Mm,
needed? So it does, um, we do need the support and the connection. It does take work. It does take self-awareness, and it takes time, right? It's something that is ever changing and ever evolving. So that's how I would answer that. I think it's an ongoing process of intervention, reflection, and so on.
And then sometimes reaching out for support, and then sometimes learning the
Absolutely.
skills through that support that you can manage it by yourself. And then, oh, I
Mhm.
need support again. So like it sounds like a bit of a dance there. Shamyle, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, just that. I think one thing I could say is that uh, depression is not something that is natural to happen. That is why it's categorized as a
Mhm.
disorder, like it's out of order. There is an imbalance there. And if there is an imbalance in something that is naturally does not carry space for it, right, then it means that it's a reflection of something that's not going right. So we're out of balance means there's something else that is out of proportion as well, right? So what reflection is going to do is like um, open your eyes to the context, and then that's why it's needed. Once you see, then you can intervene, right? So that's why, yeah, these go
Mhm.
hand in hand.
Yeah.
Thank
What I
you.
would just to add to that, if I
Mhm.
may, is that again, you don't need to wait until you're not feeling well.
Yeah.
There are such things as being proactive and seeking out support in advance. There's also such things as having tune-up sessions, right? Like I often get these where clients have been in therapy for a while, they've dealt with the most critical issue, and they check in once a month. And that's okay too, because then you can kind of stay on top of things and it helps with that reflection piece. And it helps with that increasing that awareness piece in terms of how you're really managing.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And we have a comment here just Yes, like the symptom of something deeper. So it's that awareness. We are not in depression. We are experiencing it. So kind of learning to
Mhm.
navigate between that as as we are trying to come into balance, when they're in that
Absolutely.
imbalance and coming back to it. Thank you.
I want to add here, one of the things that very naturally and commonly comes up in counseling sessions with my clients is we talk about relationships being reflections to ourselves, like who we are, how we are at that time. And so you really need to have a relationship with yourself so you can reflect, right? Back to you, how you're doing. So if you're entering spaces that are transparent, that are designed to have more of you and less of them professionally, it's naturally going to help you see more of yourself and how you're doing. So that's where counseling comes in. Yeah.
Mm.
Thank you for that. That is helpful. Is there anything we've got where I think we're just at time here? Is there anything else coming in? I don't see anything else. So anything in closing, Ilda, then Shamyle?
I'll let
I
Ilda
think I'll
close. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna pass it on to you. Um, I honestly, I think, we oftentimes talk about compassion to others. We don't talk about giving ourselves compassion and grace. And
Mm.
if you start anywhere today, it's work on giving yourself grace and compassion. It's a good start of the journey.
Yes. Shamyle?
Yeah, you can't go wrong with compassion. So whatever compassion interacts with, it makes more of it. Right? You are going to relax into your life and you'll be more of you. All right, you'll expand, and that's what we need. Especially when you're growing into roles, we want you to grow into another dimension in your life
Mhm.
as opposed to a character that you have borrowed or internalized from somewhere else. So yeah, I think that the sooner you or the sooner you start your relationship with yourself consciously, make it, turn on the lights in your mind and see what's around and do your spring cleaning, the better it's going to be. And it's going to reflect in every area of your life, really, because you're multidimensional, right? So, yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you for those takeaways. Thank you, everyone, for spending that hour with us. Please reach out to Sakeenah via the website, email, or phone number if you're looking for additional support for you. And again, thank you all. Thank you, Ilda and Shamyle, for sharing those words of wisdom,
Thank you.
and appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody, for
you.
coming on. Thank you, Devin.
You're
Yes, thank you,
welcome.
Devin.
Thank you. We have one more message. Wonderful session. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.